Hello, in this video I'm going to show you a lot of the new features that are in Vixen 3.6 and going into Vixen 3.6 Update 1. I'm going to be using the development build 887, which is pretty much brand new as of yesterday. It has everything that 3.6 has and what's going to be in 3.6U1. So I'll try to point out which is in the previous 3.6 and what's in the new one as we go along, just to make it clear. So there's been a lot of overall improvements, bug fixes, things throughout the application. Well over 120 tickets since the last release of last year. So I'm not going to touch on every one of them. I'm just going to try and hit some of the major high points. So we're going to start with the editor. And one of the main things that's new in the editor now is the revamping of the toolbars up here at the top. So there's a lot more flexibility in how you can configure the editor these days to suit your needs. So in this case here, I have the color library, the gradient library, and the curve library as a toolbar up here now. Previously it was just a Docker window, and those Docker windows are still available. You know, I can turn the curve library window on, but these two mirror each other. But the toolbar may be more convenient for you and take up less space and give you more room for other things in your editor, depending on how you want to configure it. So it works much the same way as the other ones do. You can drag colors down here to other effects, or you can drag them across to the editor window itself. Those all work. You can drop curves on here, or you can move the curve, drop it directly onto there. Works both way, back and forth, the same directions and everything that you used to be able to do with the Docker window, or you can still do with the Docker window. So most all that functionality remains up here. You can add new colors or add new gradients or curves to those libraries, just like you can the others. You can edit or delete them. The import export functions are right click available here as well. Those just mirror the functions in the Docker before. You can show or hide items, so like if you only want certain colors to show up or certain gradients or certain curves on the toolbar, you can click here and turn off individual ones back and forth. So they'll always show up here. You can turn them on and off if you have bunches of them that you need to subset it down. You're working on a certain sequence. You only know you're going to use certain colors, gradients, or curves. You can tailor make that. This is stored by the profile. You can also reset the toolbar all the way back to normal. So if you have a bunch of them that have been hidden, you can reset it quickly and turn them all back on. You can change the image size. You can make this toolbar bigger or smaller from that perspective. So if you want bigger ones, you can make them bigger or smaller. It makes each one of these has that option all its own. So depending on what size you want, you can have that. Other options are being able to turn on and off individual toolbars up here. So right now I don't have the alignment toolbar turned on, but I can turn that on and it comes up here. And then these work a lot like you would expect. I can take this toolbar and rearrange it wherever I want to, stick it in different places, and reorganize that to be convenient however I want these set up to be up here. So I can do the same thing with the image size there. I can make them smaller or bigger, so that if I wanted those to be on the line with some of these smaller ones, I can make them bigger or smaller there as well. So all these toolbars are configurable that way. The effect toolbar is here as well. The Docker window is still there if you wanted to use the one before, or you can turn it into a toolbar. I've got it in icon mode here, but I can go in here and turn the labels back on if I want the labels on. I can put them above or below it, so that way you have the labels for the effects if you need the labels, or if you're familiar with what the images are, well, you can just turn that off and compact it down even more. So A lot more flexibility with all the toolbars up here than was previous there before. So you can customize that to your need. Another thing that's changed up here in the play bar, we used to have a play button here and a pause button. So those have been combined together now. So when you hit play, hang on a second, let me turn this off. So when you hit play, it turns into a pause button. So when you hit pause, it goes back to the play button, and then stop works as it always did. So those kind of condenses this a little bit, gets rid of one extra button in there, and starts to resemble what other media players do in the rest of the world out there. So couple of that's mainly the differences in the toolbar there. So let's start taking a look at some of the changes to the effect editor over here. So in this case here, we're looking at the editor that has these color gradient and curve pairs here. So previously these were narrower. This label was over on the left hand side here, like it is up here, and the curve or the gradient when these lists only took up part of the space here. So we've moved the label up on top and allowed these to be wider here to give them a little better adjustability and easier to see. And then the add and remove are still down here like they used to be. We've changed some of this so that the mouse responds better. It used to be that you couldn't use your scroll wheel when you were hovered over this list here to scroll. It would not scroll the whole thing, and you'd have to kind of get off to the side or use your mouse on this. So that's been fixed and works a lot nicer now. We've added a help icon up here that takes you to the help site website for this particular effect. So if I click on this image here, then you can see right here that it took me right to the alternating documentation on the website directly there, so I can go right to whichever effect that I'm currently working on to see that. That's the biggest part of the changes in the actual effect editor part. We've made, and you can see those other changes here. See, just the regular gradients also work the same way, so they take up, makes it a lot easier to edit these. So let's go on and look at some of the other changes. So some of the effect changes. So the wipe has received a little bit of love. It's got more options now on the directions that you can go. So here in this case here, I'm wiping vertical, which is the way that it's always been there. But now we don't have the wipe up and wipe down. It's just vertical, and then you choose the direction by changing the checkbox here. So you can see that if it's defaulted, it goes down, and if you click the checkbox, it reverses directions there. Same with the horizontal now. It starts off by horizontal to the right, and if you reverse the direction, it horizontals to the left. We've added diagonal now, so there's diagonal up and to the right. So it moves across it at a 45-degree angle. The reversing of the direction does what you would expect. It changes it across to the other direction. There's a diagonal down now. The directional works, in the down direction in one way or the other. And circle burst is another new direction on that. This resembles the shock wave, but it's much simpler and just has a simple donut type effect across it. So that works out pretty well. And if you reverse it, it goes inward instead of outward there. So that adds quite a few new options to the wipe effect, makes it a little more flexible from that perspective. I think there were a couple other minor changes in there as well. So let's move on and look at the butterfly effect, and this applies to several other effects as well. We've added the ability in here with the speed curve to adjust how the speed changes over time, and you can also get it to a spot where it actually pauses. So you can see here that this one is decelerating, and then it pauses and sits almost stationary there. So there's several effects now that support the speed curve and make that much more configurable from that standpoint. So that it takes a look at some of the highlights of those couple of effects changes. There's a new effect called liquid, and I'll just give a brief shot at here. It basically has the nozzles and emitters that emit particles into whatever scenario or item it's sitting on. There's a bunch of configuration options and how this can be configured. So there's probably a whole nother video on just that effect. I think the developer that made that was planning on doing that. But just to highlight that that's a brand new effect that's new this year. I think that's a lot of the big changes that have happened in the editor. There's some other changes with how the preview window works, and so if you're sequencing on a laptop, sometimes it's kind of hard to, if you hit play here, then you got to drag this out of the way to see what's going on in the background there, and that can be kind of annoying. So there's a new option now where you can say auto on top on the preview, and then if you're in the actual sequencer here, so I'm going to hit the space bar now, and then you'll notice that when I hit spacebar, the preview itself pops forward, so it's easy to see what's going on there. And as soon as I stop the playing, the preview goes back behind again. So this might help some of you folks that are sequencing on a laptop where you're trying to see much more screen real estate, where you can easily toggle things back and forth between the editor and seeing the preview while you play. So it's real handy, especially like if you want to play just a small section. So I can highlight this section here and I hit play, and then it'll run that section there, and as soon as it stops, then it comes right back to where I can resume my editing again. So that gives me a little more flexibility in toggling back and forth between editing and previewing. So another nice feature there from that perspective with the auto on top. So let's go look at some other features here. So there have been some significant changes in the preview setup itself regarding how you actually set up your elements in your display. So I'm going to open up this preview here, and I've got some stuff configured. The key thing that you'll start to see that's different here now is that the element tree over here now is the same as the element tree that's in the display setup. So you can see now that these things have some degree of patching on them to begin with. The options up here to add elements like in the display setup are there. The edit options that are in here as well that are in the display setup, so I can add multiple, anything basically that you could do in the display setup is now available in the preview. So this should help you with toggling back and forth between the preview and the display setup when you're adding and creating elements. So in the typical pass too, you would create your elements and then come into the preview and then link one of the smart objects to it by clicking on the actual object and then dragging down here, which links them together. But now we've kind of incorporated that all together to make things easier to do all in one shot. So if I wanted to create a megatree, I can now just click on the smart object, come out here and drag the megatree out here wherever I want it, and let it go, and then it's going to pop up the wizard. So this is the wizard that we would have normally invoked from here or from the display setup, and I can tell it that I want to create my megatree. This is the second one in this display. I want it to be pixels, string count 16, 50. I can configure this just like I did with the wizard before, and then I hit OK, and then the wizard's going to continue. It's going to ask me if I want to add a dimming curve for this prop. So if I say yes, it goes ahead and gives me the ability here to set up my dimming curve. So I can do whatever I want here to create my dimming curve. Use a library curve, which is probably one of the better ways. Pick a gamma curve here. So I've got a gamma curve here that's tied to a library curve, so that everything is now linked to this one curve. If I want to change this particular curve, everything in this mega tree is all linked to that particular curve. So then I say OK there. This is the same kind of wizard I would see in the setup helper and display setup if I added a dimming curve. So I hit OK. It tells me that the 800 dimming curves were added as expected, just like it would do in display setup. And then it takes me to the color handling part. So this is exactly what I would do in the display setup for color handling. These are full color RGB, which has been selected for me already. So I can just say OK here. It configures all the color handling up for these. And now this prop is all set up and ready to go from that basic perspective now. You can see here if I drill into here, these are linked up with the dimming curves and the color handling like they should be. It's linked to the prop like it should be here, so I'm all good to go there. Oops. And then all I would need to do is if I want to modify the settings of how the tree is shaped, so I can make it a 180 tree now if I want to here, and just finalize that, adjust how it looks here. But this is all set up and ready to go at this point in the game. So it takes a lot of that back and forth from the display setup to the preview. Only thing I really need to do now with this new mega tree and the display setup is actually do the patching to the end controller at that point. So the final piece I need to do is just go patch it up, and I'm ready to go there from that point. So that makes things a whole lot easier to configure and set up. If you add one of these up here directly through the wizard, it'll create the element just like it does in display setup and walk you through that same thing, and then you would just link the smart object to it as you would in the past. But if you go directly starting from the smart object, then that's all taken care of in one shot for you at that point. So that's what the major changes in the preview setup. There's been bunches of bug fixes around in here. Things will work a little better than they used to be. Some of the bugs with the zooming and stuff have been resolved as well. So that sets up your display or your preview there. So then we'll just go into display setup here real quick, and you can see that my mega tree that I added is here. The items here, if you look down here, the color and the location are set here as well. From that perspective, everything's all set up and ready to go. I look at the graphical view, you can see the dimming curve is here, the color breakdown is here as it should be. All I need to do at this point now is just patch this guy up, and I'm good to go from that perspective. So that takes care of one of the major features in making setting up your display easier. Let's move on to the custom prop editor here. And for the most part, there really hasn't been any changes in the prop editor itself. There's some information or new ways here to set up face info for particular props. So if you're building a prop and it's going to be a face component, you can label the groups and pieces that you need for you to be the mouth or the AI or whichever pieces you want to map to the phonemes. You can then now actually configure them right here directly, set them up out of the box so that the custom prop is that way to begin with. And then whenever that's imported into the preview, the face handling setup that we introduced last year for the lip sync, where you would go in and do the mapping, will automatically be created for you. So now when you build a custom prop here that's a face prop, and then you import it into the preview, it will create all the elements just like we did with the smart objects there, and create the face mapping and completely set everything up for you. So again, once all you have to do at that point is just patch and then go start your sequencing. Another item that's been added this year is a vendor browser. So right now there's one vendor, Boscoyo, that's participating with this, and the models that they have out there are X models, so they're not native Vixen models, but we've wired this up to where you can browse those models that they have out there and look at them and see You can see an image of what that prop is. You get the information about the prop and all the pertinent information the vendor has provided there. If you click this link here, that'll take you to the vendor's website where that prop is being advertised. And then the model options back here, there may be one or more options available in here. And what this does is shortcut the importing of the X model into a Vixen sequence or setup here. So if I select this here, it will go out, grab the X model for it, convert it to the Vixen prop format, and bring it in and set everything up for you here, just like it would, the designer of the model has pointed out it should be. So we start to look here and back to the pieces of the element info. So you can see on this particular one, the face outline has already been mapped. It's been told that it's an outline. The mouth AI has been mapped to the AI, and all the pieces are already configured here and ready to go. So when I import this into the preview, it will create all the face mapping for me automatically. The only thing that I really need to do from this perspective is those models don't have the token replacement stuff in them. That is nice if you're adding multiple ones of these to your show. So what you would do then is just take this in here and edit these individual items to add the curly brace, zero curly brace token that you've seen in other videos, so that you can bring this in as, chroma bulb 1, chroma bulb 2, or however you want the naming to be. So but for the most part, anything from this particular vendor, you've got a really good head start on getting a valid preview item for your show. So big improvement there. It should save a lot of time and make things easier for folks going forward. So I'm not going to save this particular one. So the other thing, and there's another video for this, is now the ability to import and export native Vixen 3 sequence packages. So I'll refer you to the other video. This is actually a 3.6U1 feature that will be released in that, coming out soon. So but you can export one-to-many sequences and all the items that belong to it. The pieces like a video effects or pictures, or all the pieces that are there. Export those, share those with someone else, and then they can import that into a different profile and map it up and bring it in without having to have the full profile or do copying and pasting between the two of them. There's a whole separate video on that new option this year. Aside from those are the big major feature improvements. Again, there's lots of little improvements to the effects. There's more performance improvements in some of the display setup area, outputting the lights. If you've got the controllers turned on, there's a lot more efficiency improvements made there to utilize CPU a little better. So overall, things should generally be a little faster. There should be more capacity to handle larger shows than there has been in the past. There's been several bug fixes in the scheduler as well, so it should work a lot better from that perspective. So I think that's the highlights of Vixen 3.6 and the soon-to-be Vixen 3.6 Update 1. Probably do other videos on more specific items in the future.